Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dungeon Dive. Daniel here. I hope you're doing well, and if you're not, I hope you are soon. Okay, on today's episode, we are taking a quick look at Sleeping Gods, Primeval Peril. And this is an official printed, updated version of a print-on-demand or a DIY smaller version of Sleeping Gods that was originally available during the first Kickstarter for the original Sleeping Gods. Now, this new version, they brought it out as something you could purchase in the last Kickstarter for Distant Skies, the new version of Sleeping Gods. And I actually didn't buy that new version. The reason was I just didn't want another kind of big box version of Sleeping Gods. I already have the original with both of the expansions, and I love that game so much. I just didn't feel like I needed another version of Sleeping Gods at that size. But I was super interested in this smaller size. And just to give you a comparison, this box is about the same size as something like Warhammer Quest, the adventure card game, or Elder Sign. So it's kind of borderlines on a small box game. What's even better than the box size is the price. At retail, you can pick this up for under $40. And man, I think that is just a fantastic price for something like this. And what this is basically a smaller, stripped down, more concise, condensed version of Sleeping Gods. And Primeval Peril, its setting is on a river, and that does a really good job of conveying the scope of the game, the new kind of smaller, more directed scope. Because Sleeping Gods, of course, Distant Skies, and the original, you have a vast open world to explore. But in Primeval Peril, you are confined to a river. And so being on a river, you know that you can only follow where the river takes you. And there are a few splitting paths. And so the setting dictates the scope of the narrative and the scope of the adventure. And I think that is pretty cool. Let's take a little look at the back of the box here before we dive into some detail about the game. So there's not a lot of text here on the back of the box, but this says that you've been transported to a strange world. Sleeping Gods Primeval Peril is an open-world narrative adventure game. You must guide your characters through a dangerous jungle, making story choices and battling vicious creatures. So just a couple weeks ago, I, along with my family, took a trip to Disneyland to celebrate my birthday. And one of my favorite rides at Disneyland is the Jungle Cruise, is the old ride. I think it is so much fun. And I actually went on it 2 or 3 times on this trip. And when I got back, I was feeling a little nostalgic for Disneyland. And so I thought it would be a perfect time to bring out Primeval Peril, because this really is kind of an adventure game that reminds me of the Jungle Cruise. There are even some similar types of encounters that you might have, like with piranha and that kind of thing. But yeah, so this is a stripped down version of Sleeping Gods. And I'm not going to show a whole bunch because a lot of this game is in that sense of discovery. But in the game, you will get a map book, and that map book will have your pictures of the river, and the river will have different spaces on it with different things you can interact with, along with different combat cards. Or I guess I should say combat pages, because one of the things that they did here was they eliminated the need for a deck of combat cards. All of your combat encounters are printed on the opposite page of the area in which you might find these creatures. So when you are exploring this path of the river, this leg of the river here, this branch, you might encounter these Zarg rats, or a Zarg rat raider, or another Zarg rat. And so you have this similar style of combat, but you don't have individual combat cards. And I think this is a really good use of this book. It makes a concise kind of collection of all of the things that you need for exploration and combat into a single small book. And so as you explore the river, you can explore the different spaces. The different river spaces might have these numbers in red circles, and those will correspond to different passages in the storybook. The storybook is very well written. Ryan Lockett and his wife, I forgot her name, is Ryan Lockett and Mallory Lockett. They do all of the writing. And I think they're some of the better writers in the board game industry. Very good, concise. You're not reading tons of paragraphs or tons of pages for each encounter, so you aren't spending a ton of time in the storybook. It's a good amount of time spent reading the narrative. You will also have these different spaces that you can take different exploration turns to explore, and then you can explore just based off of the cave here or the hidden treasure here. You can explore what is actually printed on the page, and that will usually tell you some kind of test that you have to take. And then if something bad happens because you fail that test, you will usually take some damage or you will lose some items or something like that. And then you will usually gain some kind of bonus when you take that exploration action. One of the main things you're trying to find are these blood flowers. And you need a certain number of these blood flowers when you get to the end of the game. And every time you find 5 blood flowers, you can level up one of your characters. So speaking of characters, because this is a smaller version of Sleeping Gods, the crew that you are in command of is a smaller crew. So we have the captain, and then we have 4 different crew members. We have Captain Jim Vine. All the players, if you're playing multiple players, this game is specifically made for 2 players or solo. I believe there are some house rules or some additional custom rules where you can play with 3 or 4, but this is specifically a game made for 1 or 2 players. But whenever it's your turn, you will always control Captain Jim Vine, and then the other crew members will be divided amongst the players. So we have Dr. Timothy Milk, we have Lee Mei Ling, we have John Lee, and Lois Owens. Right now, Lois Owens, I have her armed with a fishing pole. So when I take a rest action, she will be able to catch some fish and add some meat to our inventory. And then that also gives her a +1 to that cunning skill, I believe. Yes, so we have different skills. Each of the characters will specialize in different skills. Captain Jim Vine is good at all the skills, so that's strength, perception, savvy, cunning, and crafting. We have Dr. Timothy Milk. He's good at 4 of them. Mei Ling is good at 4. John Lee is only good at 3. And Lois Owens down here just off screen is good at 4. And when you take a test, you will usually have something you will say, okay, do a strength test and you're trying to get 5 or higher. And so if I was to use Captain Jim Vine and Timothy Milk, I would look at their icons. I have a strength icon here, a strength icon there. So that's going to give me a 2. And then I would roll the green die here and I would add that. So 6 + 2 would be 8, and I would overcome that challenge. And then different items can also give you different types of skill bonuses. And we also have this thing here called useful gear. Useful gear will allow me to help me with my crafting checks. And when I take a rest action, I can also get 2 tokens here that will allow me to re-roll either the challenge die or the combat die when I get into combat. Now, like Sleeping Gods, one of the focuses on this game, in addition to it being an adventure, a narrative adventure where you are having all kinds of random encounters, but one of the things you are trying to do is manage a few different resources. And I think the resource management comes into a little more narrowly focused. It's a little more focused on in this game just because the entire experience is a little more condensed. And one of the main resources you are going to be managing is your character's health. Each of the characters has a certain number of hit points, and they will take damage. Don't worry, don't fret about your characters taking damage. That's just something that will happen in this game because that is a major resource that you are trying to track. If all of your characters ever get down to 0 HP, that's one of the ways that you can lose the game. But you can also heal them. In addition to your health, another resource is your stamina. And each of the characters will start with 3 stamina. And in order to use that character in a test, or in order to use them to do something during the adventure portion of the game, you have to spend a point of stamina. If they ever go down to 0 stamina, they can no longer take an action. They can no longer take part in that activity. And so to regenerate their stamina and to regenerate their health, you need to take rest actions. And you can only take 6 rest actions during a game. As soon as you've taken your 6th rest action, you have 3 more turns to complete your adventure. And in this game, you are trying to move down the river and trying to locate a crew member that has been kidnapped by some kind of winged demonic beast who has flown off with them into the distance in the north. So that is your overall goal. You will keep track of your goals by drawing these quest cards. And these quest cards are from the numbered adventure deck. And so, in Sleeping Gods, we had different decks for different quests and items and so on. So Primeval Peril, in its attempt to condense things, has moved all of the cards into a single deck that has numbers 1 through 69. And these will be all of your different quests, all of your different items, in addition to some of your combat items. And this is where I think this game is pretty cool, and it differs a little bit from Sleeping Gods, is your crew will have a deck of combat cards. And you have to have a minimum of 12. There's a little bit of deck building in this game. I think it's pretty cool because you can discover new combat cards. And these will be different weapons and different types of gear and things that you can use. And so you always have to have at least 12. You can't have more than 12. But if you find something more powerful, like I found this pan bow, I added it to my deck and removed one of the weaker cards. So I made my deck stronger. Each time you get into combat, you will draw 1 card per player, and then you'll draw a card for each one of your characters, and then you can assign a combat card to those characters to participate in that kind of puzzle-like combat. So the combat in Sleeping Gods Primeval Peril continues to be pretty interesting and quite difficult. Your characters will take a lot of damage, and that's okay. That's part of that resource management in this game. I can't stress this enough, but in this game, health is a resource. You will be losing it and you will be gaining it. It's a give and take. It's a tug of war. But when you are in combat, you will have to cover up the spaces of the monsters, of their health. And if this space here has a 3, you have to do 3 damage in order to cover up that space. Once you cover up that space, if you have additional damage, like if you were to do 4 damage, then you can do splash damage to the adjacent enemies, or you can do splash damage to the adjacent hearts on that same enemy. The enemies will also have these power icons, and those power icons will add damage tokens to the enemy. So when they hit you, when they retaliate in a counterattack, they will do more damage. So it's very beneficial to cover up these power spots as quickly as possible. If there are any enemies left after all of the players have taken their turn, after all of your crew members, then the enemies will do their attack to you. And these are the end of round attacks where they will add some poison. They will give each ally 1 power. So they will add to the damage that the allies will do on the next round. Or they can also inflict other kind of status conditions, such as being weakened. We have frightened, or we have madness, and we also have venom. In addition to managing health and managing your stamina, you will also have a number of resources that you can manage, and those are these tokens here. And these tokens here can be spent for a number of different things. We have different types of food that you can combine to gain more health. We don't have as many recipes. One of the cool things in the original Sleeping Gods was those recipes that you could cook. I haven't seen very many of those, but we have these different types of food. We have torches that can be used for skill checks and that can be used to add damage. We have these treasure maps that can be used for a skill check, and they can also be used to find hidden treasure in the map. And then we have these coins, and coins can be used to purchase things when you find merchants. They can also be used for skill checks. And finally, we have these rope. The rope can be used for crafting and can also be used to remove a power point from one of the enemies so they don't do as much damage to you. In addition to the adventure deck here that numbered 1 through 69, We also have an event deck, and at the beginning of each turn, you will draw an event deck. Now, in the original Sleeping Gods, the event deck changed over the course of your game. That doesn't happen in Primeval Peril. You will just shuffle all of your event cards together, and you do have a nice number of them. And there are all kinds of different events that'll happen. Usually they are pretty bad. Your food goes rotten, or a character gets sick. Something happens. This is usually some kind of bad luck, some kind of bad thing that you will have to overcome. And it's never fun drawing one of these, but it is fun balancing out that resource management, that kind of survival horror aspect of Sleeping Gods, along with the different adventures, the different quests, the different types of combat encounters you can get into, and the different narrative encounters, while also keeping track of the different quests and how you are exploring your map. So as you can see, there are a few branching paths. And so because this is a narrative game, these branching paths will also be branching story parts, and you won't be able to explore the entire river or each of the points of interest in a single game because of this time limit. And so there will be things that you will need to bypass, and then you can come back in future games to explore more. I bet you could probably get a good handful of games before you see everything, and then by that time you've probably forgotten some of the things, or you can try to do better. There's kind of a score chasing mode where at the end of the game you tally up a score and you see how well you did, and you can try to improve on that by bringing in your knowledge as the player, and then hopefully you can do better. Hopefully you can mitigate some of that bad luck better. On a turn-by-turn basis, you are going to be in charge of the boat, and you will be taking certain types of actions. So you'll keep track of your boat here, and this is your action, your action card here. And that tells you what you can do. For 1 time, you can travel from one space to the next. For 2 time, you can explore, and you can explore those narrative events where you will read a passage, or you can explore one of the special spaces on the map. For 2 time, you can repair your ship, and then you'll make a crafting test, and then you can repair your ship. If your boat's health ever goes down to 0, then you have to automatically mark off one of those moon symbols here, thus taking the time towards that in-game failure. And then you can also choose to take a rest action, and the rest action doesn't take any time, but it does take up one of those moon spots. And when you do that, you gain all of your characters' stamina back. Each of the characters gains 2 health back, and then you can remove 1 steak and 1 fruit to gain 5 health that you can distribute amongst your crew. And so this really does kind of control the game, and it tells you everything that you can do on one turn to the next. So overall, I think Sleeping Gods Primeval Peril does a really good job of conveying the sense of adventure and survival elements of its bigger brother, Sleeping Gods, and probably Sleeping Gods Distant Skies. I don't know too much about that game, but I'm assuming that it's somewhat similar to the original game. And it condenses everything down into a smaller box, into a more condensed experience, into a shorter experience, and one that delivers on that sense of adventure that I look for. I'm especially happy with this game at the price that it comes in and at the size that it comes in. $40 for this is a great price. I could see them actually bumping this up to $50, but the fact that you can find it on Amazon for something like $37.99 USD is pretty great. There are a good number of different combat cards, of different types of skills that your characters can learn, of different items that they can find to help them overcome those skill challenges. I think this deck is really interesting. I think the event deck is interesting. There are a bunch of bad things, but it is fun to overcome them and to eke out that victory. As you're exploring the river, there are a whole bunch of different things to explore, and you will be checking off different things. You will be keeping notes on what you have discovered. You will earn new keywords, such as this Quest 57 here is a cursed statue. And you have now this keyword carved. So if you ever come across that keyword, you have to do what it says because you have that keyword attached to your characters. I like managing the party. Same thing goes with Sleeping Gods. In that game, in this game, I do not feel like I am managing 5 or 9 individual characters. I feel like I am managing one crew. It feels like a crew that works together as a single character, and it's very easy to manage. Some games are very difficult to manage a whole party of characters, but I don't feel that with these games. So overall, I am just generally very happy with this game. When I want a shorter, more condensed version of Sleeping Gods, this is what I'll turn to. When I want something more expansive and more epic, I will turn to my original version of Sleeping Gods. So, all right, everyone, I hope you enjoyed this brief review of Sleeping Gods Primeval Peril. We will talk to you later. Bye-bye.